Hello everybody. Today I'm going to present you again the evaluation of suitability of non-specialized volunteer research for coral reef fish surveys. So it's going to be a study case in Mafia Island in Tanzania, Africa. So this research happens in Mafia Island, which is located in Zanzibar archipelago in Tanzania, Africa. Frontier Tanzania, it's a research program who was created in 1989 to protect Rudy Mafia Kilwin Marine Park. So it's here on the south on the island, and it's a protected area where we can find a great diversity of marine wildlife. The goal of the research is to test and validate that no specialistic volunteer divers are able to correctly identify fish living in coral reefs, to prove that it takes learning to improve your abilities by doing several sensors, and that people be able to estimate length with 80% of accuracy in relation to the true distribution. And the last one is to create a baseline survey and monitor conditions in marine habitats. So the advantage to use volunteer is to provision of manpower sufficient to conduct extensive surveys, a significant financial saving because volunteers are workers who are not paid, and finally to awareness the public of ecological problems through active participation, and like this they can realize what is the real problem. So for the method, they work in groups of 12 to 25 individuals, persons, and they are by pairs. They survey during 10 weeks, and it consists in a visual census of 56 selected fish species of Serenidae. So why Serenidae? It's because they are conspicuous, easily identified, and not very pelagic. They also have a slow growth and rate and large age at maturity that making them vulnerable to overfishing. So they're gonna determine their diversity and abundance and length frequency. And during the trials, during the first week, they're gonna do several exercise like diving training like this, training in the identification and ecological formation of species, and learn about different surveys techniques. So the study area and material, they are working in pairs, as I said before, in a reef profile of 10 meters 4 and 3 meter rise. The area is a shallow area next to the coal bay, who is exposed at a low spring tide and who is surrounded by the sun. So that means the area is an isolated reef from the other by 20 meters in all directions, and that reduces the possibility to reef fish migration into or out the study site during the trial period. The area can be surveyed fully in 30 minutes. For the material, there are 50 strips of orange plastic canvas were cut into lengths between 10 centimeters and 1 centimeters. The strips were triated randomly in a 100-meter rows, each being separated by at least its own length. A stick of 100 millimeters length, making them in 100 millimeter intervals, was placed in front of the first strips as a reference length. And so after noting the length on the reference sticks, divers swam along the rope, classifying the length of canvas into 10 centimeter size clays. So there is 6 pair of volunteers. Divers surveyed the site on 5 consecutive days. There is also one experienced research diver, who is referred as the control diver, who surveyed the site to compare the precision achieved under identical conditions over the same period between the volunteers and a research person. And all of the surveys were conducted with 1 hour of slack high water. So it's a short period in a body of tidal water when the water is completely unstressed. Uh, so they make this to avoid changing nocturnal and diurnal fish population and to avoid fish activity or distribution with current speed. During the first census, the experience of fish identification was limited just to the study of photographs, drawings, and 3 divers on coral reef. And the second census happens 5 weeks later. For the data analysis, they calculate the precision. So it's the measure of the repeatability or similarity between fish counts. They also count the similarity. So it's an index which range from 0 when two census have no space in common to 1 when the distribution of individual across species is identical. The similarities between the true and estimated distribution of length of plastic were determined with the similarity. And the amplitude of the difference between the two distributions is a test who calculate the maximum difference, so Dmax, between size classes. So about this table, so this table is a comparison of the total number of species and individual fish in census 1 and 2. So in census 1, we can find 43 species recorded and only 13 in census 2. So there is a big difference between them. So the species misidentified in census 1 is due to a lack of experience because of the low probability of fish migration. The decrease in the misidentified species in census 2 suggests an improvement in the species identification. And in green, we can see the number of individuals in census 1 and in census 2. It's a really big difference too. So that's proof that the volunteers have improved in the census because they report more individuals. So in this figure is a coral fish survey using volunteer research. On the x-axis, we find the different divers, so diver 1, and it is a control diver. And here on the ordinary axis, we have the level of precision. So the figure A, this one, it's a repeater counts by the same diver in census 1 and 2. So this diver and this one is the same, and we calculate the level of precision. So in census 1, we can find a mean of 0.6 in precision. And on the census 2, we can find a mean of 0.7 in precision. So the loss of coherence was reduced between census 1 and 2. That means an improvement in individual voluntary divers. So an individual person has improved between the diver 1 and the diver 2. And the panel B, it's a repeated count between 12 different divers in a same group in census 1 and 2. So this is all of the precision during the first dive for 12 people, and this one is the same, but for the census 2. So we can find a mean of 0.6 in precision, and here we can find a 0.8 in precision. So that means there is an improvement in voluntary surveys too. Here we can find two diagrams that express the same thing, the length of the fish in centimeters, here and here, and according to the frequency of them. So the estimates of length of canvas strips were used to produce frequency distribution. If P is close to 1, that means it's not significant difference between the estimated and true distribution of length. So here we can find in the census 1, P it's 0.44, and in the census 3 its p is close to it's more close to 1, it's 0.88. So here we can see in the third one, in the census 3, that the line is overlapped the frequency of the test. That indicates that the diver were able to improve the accuracy during the trials. In these results, we can find a similarity between divers in trial 3 in estimated length of canvas strips. So the range go to 0 when two sensors have no spaces in common, to 1 when the distribution of individuals across spaces is identical. So we notice a majority index equal or close to 1. That confirms that the census has been correctly done. And the results close to 0, it's maybe due to errors due to the lack of experience. So a group of 12 non-specialist volunteer divers was shown to reach a mean level of precision in the census of reef population, equivalent to that achieved by an experienced researcher. And even with the minimum of training, like in census 1, non-specialists can collect consistent data, and a volunteer can be trained in a period less than 2 weeks. We can conclude that there is no significant loss in accuracy associated with the use of non-specialists in these trials. And for the research limitation, we can find that the divers... Yeah, is the last slide. Yeah, the diver memorized the size of some strips according to their position on the line, and it wasn't possible to keep the distance from the observer to the canvas strips. But the solution could be maybe changing the order of strips on the line between trials to prevent memorization, and try to don't go closer than the stipulated 3-meter distance from the models. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your presentation. I think you improved what teacher mentioned in the review video. Thank you.
Okay, and thanks for your presentation. And you enlarged the fonts and made the tables by yourself, and you explained the x and y axis of the figure, so that's good.